Tax deductions for donations that go to Christian schools, the jagged edge of free speech, restricting sales of violent video games to kids, all on the docket for the Supreme Court this fall. This is the Citizen Link Report. I'm Stuart Shepard along with Bruce Hausknecht, our judicial analyst. Hi, Bruce.
Hi, Stuart.
The Supreme Court is back in session. Both of President Obama's picks for the court are now in their seats. Let's talk about some of what they'll be considering starting this week. First, the case out of Arizona dealing with tuition scholarships for Christian schools. What's it all about?
Right. This is an interesting First Amendment religion clause case. State of Arizona, like 8 or 9 other states, have provided parents with an option or an encouragement to send their children to private schools if that's the option they want. It's a school choice issue. And what the state of Arizona has done is said, we'll give you a $1 for $1 tax credit up to $500 or $1,000 per married couple for every dollar you donate to a school tuition organization, which funds these scholarships.
Right.
And it was going along fine, but it was protested by some taxpayers. First at the state level, state said, this is constitutional, this doesn't offend the First Amendment. Then in federal district court, they said, fine, you don't have a case here. Went to the Ninth Circuit, our friends in California. And the Ninth Circuit held that this law establishing this program violated the Establishment Clause of the First Amendment.
And the reason being that they were giving scholarships to send students to Christian schools, religious schools.
That's right. And it wasn't just that they were sending these were sending to some schools. It's at some point during this process, more people gave to these organizations that funded religious education than secular education. And the Ninth Circuit didn't like that for some reason and said, we've suddenly crossed a boundary.
Now, it sounds analogous to, there are a lot of church-related nonprofit groups that people may give to and get a tax deduction for that. How is this different?
It's not really. This is the same principle that many of us are familiar with when we give to 501c3 charitable organizations, be they a church or a public zoo or the ACLU for that matter. You get a deduction whether it's a Christian organization or a secular organization. And this is really no different than that, and the results should be the same. We should be allowed to do this.
And I hate to make you predict, but what's your expectation for how it will fare at the High Court?
The Ninth Circuit doesn't have a good reputation at the Supreme Court, and this is one of those cases that I would anticipate gets overturned, and the law, which is also, I might reiterate, the law in 8 other states, will be upheld.
All right, the court will also hear a challenge to protests at military funerals. This is an unfortunate thing. Families are trying to honor a fallen soldier, but yet we have a church group, oddly enough, that's protesting at these funerals. Fill in the rest of the picture for us.
Right. Fred Phelps has become infamous now for protesting the moral decay of America. And one of his chosen targets to make this message public is at funerals for military personnel who have been killed in combat. They gather their family at these funeral sites, and they protest America's moral decay, and they point to the death of a soldier, as this case is all about, in Maryland, who was killed in Iraq. They point to him as a symptom of the moral decay of America. Well, that caused all kinds of emotional distress to the family. Yeah. And they sued and said this is intentional infliction of emotional distress, it's an invasion of privacy, and a federal jury awarded them almost $11 million when this case began. And it was appealed to the Fourth Circuit, and the Fourth Circuit overturned it.
This is going to be decided on by the Supreme Court, obviously, and it will set a precedent for the whole country about where the boundaries are of free speech. That'll have an impact on all of us, whichever way it goes.
It really will. This tests the boundaries of the First Amendment. You have speech about matters of public concern, and you have private interests, privacy interests, in matters of private concern. When someone uses a private matter like a funeral to make a public statement, does the First Amendment really protect that? or does it invade the privacy of that family and cause that distress? And this really is something that hasn't been decided yet.
And just to be clear, this is a group that the slogans are pretty harsh. I mean, most people would take offense at them. We've shown you a few examples, but they aren't the harshest. I didn't want to include those on the program here. And I should also point out, this is a group that's protested us here at Citizen Link and Focus on the Family. They've come out front with their signs and protested us here. They don't like us either.
No, this is one group that has the harshest statements out there, and they're designed to offend.
All right, the court will also hear a challenge to the California law. This is one that attempted to ban the sale of violent video games to minors. What's up with that one?
Yeah, this is a case of good intent. Try to protect children from these violent video games, because we've seen them and they're alarming. But balancing that against the freedom that we have under the First Amendment to express violent things through movies and books and video games. So what the California legislature did was basically ban violent video games. And when it finally got to the courts threw it out, saying, look, this is violence. This is not obscenity, which is not protected by the First Amendment. And the attempt to turn it into obscenity so that it can be regulated doesn't quite make it under the First Amendment.
And you're being very specific here with the terms. Under free speech, under the First Amendment, obscenity is not protected.
Correct.
It is illegal. Violence, they're trying to move under that heading in order to legally say that it's something that can be restricted as obscenity can.
That's exactly right. There's one Supreme Court case that stated that it would be fair game to regulate violent sexual content, but this is not sexual content per se. This is just blood and gore, and that's never been unprotected by the First Amendment.
Now, on the covers of these games, usually they're rated under a voluntary system, and they may have an M for mature, 17 plus kind of rating. I think most parents may have the presumption that that's like an R rating at the theater, and that the stores automatically would not sell those to a young person because it's a rating, but it's not the same thing.
No, it's not, and some of these ratings of M for mature are entirely full of blood and gore, killing, and it puts you in the first person of killing people, and that's probably not something we want our kids to experience.
All right, and so parents need to be vigilant no matter which way the court case goes.
Absolutely.
President Obama put 2 new justices on the court. Sonia Sotomayor, his first choice, this week is welcoming Elena Kagan, his second choice. How will that impact the balance and dynamic of the court?
Well, Kagan replaced a liberal, and so as Sotomayor did. And therefore, we really are going to see a lot of the same splits that we did before on social issues. You know, the 4 true conservatives, 4 true liberals, and then Anthony Kennedy in the middle, deciding as he feels on each particular issue.
And it's interesting, on the seating chart, Kennedy is now more in the middle than ever. He's sitting right next to Chief Justice John Roberts.
Right. Well, he's one of the most senior judges there.
Yeah, and they're seated left to right. I mean, you've got the Chief Justice in the middle, and then by seniority, they spread out to the ends. So the 2 new choices, it's just interesting, are at the end seats on the far left and the far right, although philosophically, neither of them would be considered on the far right.
That's for sure.
All right, Bruce, anything else you'd like to share about this term before we let you go?
Well, I anticipate that we're going to see some splits along the conservative and liberal lines, and as usual, the man in the middle, the one to watch, is Anthony Kennedy.
And speaking of splits, with Elena Kagan being on the court, because her previous job was as Solicitor General, sometimes called the 10th Justice, she represents the United States before the court. She is recusing herself, taking herself out of consideration on a number of the cases coming up, as many as 25, maybe more, that we've heard about so far. That sets up the interesting possibility of a 4-4 tie at the court. Not to get too academic, but what happens if there's a tie?
Right. If there's a tie, the lower court decision simply stays in effect. So if a Fourth Circuit decision gets appealed to the Supreme Court, it's a 4-4 tie, then the Fourth Circuit decision is the one that finally is the end result of that case.
For just the Fourth Circuit or for the whole country?
For the Fourth Circuit, it will not apply to the entire country.
Can they bring it back up again?
Well, it all depends.
You're an attorney.
Yes, I am. But it really depends on the facts and whether it's been transferred back down for further proceedings or not.
All right. Well, Bruce, thank you for all your insights, and thank you for watching. We appreciate all of you who've written to share your thoughts and questions. You may always write to us at mail@citizenlink.com. We encourage you to pray for our elected officials and for the members of the Supreme Court as they're considering a lot of weighty decisions in the months ahead. Remember, stand tall and be heard.